Good afternoon, gamers, and welcome back to the ANZ Hearthstone Open presented by Blizzard and AEL. Hope you guys had a fantastic lunchtime. Of course, we are coming back just hot off the press from the New Zealand qualifiers, and now we get to move into the women's group, where we get to see who actually will take the last coveted spots and obviously make their way towards the top 16. I'm Mendrix, and joining me as always is the Wandering Bard. How was your lunch, mate?
It was perfect, Mendrix. I appreciate getting to have a little bit of a break in the middle of the day, just refresh my strength before we come back fierce as ever for this final batch of qualifiers.
Oh, absolutely, mate. What did you have for lunch? You know where I'm going with this one?
I just went and made myself a roast beef sandwich. Just something sort of. It's a nice little interval in the middle of the day. Get to just sit down in the shade. It's pretty warm out, actually. It
is nice actually at the moment.
It hasn't felt like the warm season, but maybe just spring is hitting just right about now, and so I just sort of had a quiet siesta.
Fair enough. You know what? A quiet siesta is pretty nice. Just to have a quick little nap as well, like you said, to get that power on through. I actually went down to my local Macca's and got myself a quarter pounder. There's actually a limited range on offer at the moment. When I got myself a little bit of extra bacon added on through, and if you want to be a bit healthier, you can get yourself a bit of a lettuce and lemon as well. And just to let you guys all know, McDonald's Australia is also bringing us all of the highlights of the competition. Make sure you catch them at the end of the show on AEL Social. And also, just to let you guys know as well, if your internet is a bit slow, needs a little bit of upgrades, why not check it out with Mate and Internet Mobile? We'll throw it into the chat, hashtag Let's Be Mates, and you'll be in the running to win 2 card packs valued at $3.95. So make sure you check out all the options and upgrade your services with Mate and Internet Mobile. Apart from that, though, Bart, it's time for us to start looking at our first opponents here, and I believe it's going to be Jumping Lion up against Remedy. Now, have you had a chance to have a quick sticky peek at their decks and what they're going to be running this time around?
Yeah, both players brought a priest, so I'm already excited. I also think I remember both of these names from last year's Hearthstone Open, so we've got veteran competitors. It's going to be a pretty serious matchup here. I know Jumpy Lion has been prepping all week, making sure getting these decks ready, and I'm seeing some interesting stuff. Not quite entirely different archetypes, but this is the latest tech I've seen in the Imp Warlock deck list, running a few of higher cost legendary minions than we've seen previously, even in the sort of slower builds already drifting in this direction. So we'll see if that holds up to its stats on paper. Of course, we've got the combo rogue that we're used to, and then one of these Bless Naga priest type decks. Remedy running similar lineup with a druid instead of the rogue. It's that beast token druid, but different tech in both the warlock and priest decks. So it'll be interesting to see sort of which of these finer decisions on the deck building level come out ahead.
Absolutely. I mean, looking at Remedy, I can see it is that Naga buff priest archetype. On the flip side for Jumping Lion, I think it's the Thief Priest, being able to just steal away all of the stats from those people. And it makes sense. We saw it actually happen in I believe it was yesterday's competition as well, where unfortunately Jake the Dog wasn't able to qualify through the open through the open levels, but was able to do so via the high school levels. And what was really interesting about that was he was just that close, one life out from actually taking out that point. So pretty interesting on that part. But mind you, I think now that we've decided to completely talk up Priest, watch them actually ban Priest now. I think we're still waiting for them to get it on through. And yep, sure enough.
Yep.
We cast a curse the Priest, didn't we?
It makes sense, right? We saw what you were just talking about, that matchup that we saw. It proved how much these Priest decks are kind of the counter to not just the aggro archetypes, but especially the Warlock and the Druid, these very wide board aggro decks, right? For the reason you just mentioned mainly, I think. Not only can you sort of generally out-tempo them by buffing one minion up very large, and sort of once they're behind in the race, they can't really efficiently trade with that as you continue to buff at each turn, but specifically that Shadow Word Devour is so powerful when you make a very wide board of imps or treant and little druid minions. You just end up fighting a 20/20 Radiant Elemental and a couple of turns later, and you've accelerated the Priest game plan. So since both players are bringing other decks that are vulnerable, neither of them want to face the opponent's Priest, and we're going to get some more familiar decks, it seems like.
And what's so interesting as well about the way that Thief Priest works as well, I mean, it is the fact that you can steal a lot of HP, but the attack power doesn't come in until that Bless comes through. That holding onto the Bless when you're waiting, yep, cool, my Radiant Elemental can actually attack this turn now. I've summoned it up before. It's got 20 life, but it's 120. You don't really, I mean, you have it, it's very hard if you actually remove that specific card because it's got a lot of HP. Yeah, it doesn't do that much damage, but you can be sure as hell knowing for a fact that it will actually have a ridiculous amount of attack power, because that Bless will add 2 HP and then make the attack equal to it. So definitely a very important card. I guess perhaps the Mutinous Devourer has a way to actually grab that one, and it could actually make things a bit rough for the Thief Priest, but no one's running Control Shaman, I believe, in this particular lineup. I have to double check everything across the board there, but if that was to be the case, you'd probably be happy to leaving the Priest up.
The Warlock deck is actually for Jumpy Lion. One of the tech cards that it plays now is Gigafin, which is very good at devouring that sort of minion when it's on the board. Which it kind of highlights. Apart from that, like the whole point you were making about Radiant Elemental and how tricky it can be to remove when it's just hanging out there on board as like a 2/20, does drive home how little unconditional minion removal there is in the current metagame. Even like poisonous minions or other ways of just polymorph, all these cards which might let you definitively answer a very large buff minion, they've been largely absent, apart from maybe in the Control Shaman decks. They do play that is a devolution wave, the sort of demutate all your enemy minions. That's about the only one, right? And so we've talked about how these decks are good at comboing out of hand and how hard it can be to counter those. But if you make a very large minion on board and your opponent doesn't sort of immediately have the path to victory, it is kind of this ticking time bomb until you have a Bless ready to go. And I think my main concern for that deck is just that it seems to lack a bit of card draw compared to what you'd really want when you are relying on this sort of like delicate combination of several cards. But at least there are sort of interstitial combinations of them where you're on your way to that full Bless combo that are at least helping you to control the game state until then.
Absolutely, yeah. I can definitely see that one playing out in the way that you sort of initiated those sequences and what could go into it. That being said, it is going to be the Rogue up against the Aggro Druid here, so we're going to be interested to see how that one actually plays out. I didn't get tricked at this time. The Masquerade. For those who don't know, that is not a hunter. That is, I mean, you can use the Steady Shot if you want to, but that is not a hunter. Just to let you know, that is actually a rogue in disguise. But Remedy very quickly beginning to ramp up, quite happy to throw down some of those more valuable cards. As you can see, the Peasant and, of course, the Vicious Slither Spear as well. So if those don't get removed, some very strong follow-up coming across here.
I'm just, it's curious, is it not, to see Remedy on their Aggro Druid not spending all the mana that's available? Like, it's not to say that obviously you should always use all your mana, but given how few decks are playing like proper AoE these days, I haven't seen in a while players try and bait like this, and especially when you're committing like a Peasant and a Slither Spear to the board, sort of, it really is a more is better, more is more situation where you might as well run out some 1/1 saplings or a Druid of the Reef with Taunt even to protect them. Because you've already played your best resources. There's not going to be much point putting that Druid down afterwards. And I'm just curious as to what Remedy was playing around, particularly out of the Rogue deck.
I agree, right? Because it doesn't exactly have wave clear this Rogue deck. It normally needs to tempo out some ghosts, obviously perhaps drop a far from efficient Edwin to sort of actually keep up pace with all the damage that we put out there. So it is definitely an interesting twist that Remedy's thrown into the mix, and I'm glad that you picked it up and noticed that. But as you can see, of course, they did pull out the Shroud of Shadows to actually get the Null out and, of course, deal with that Peasant, because if it's left on the board, that's just extra card draw, which, of course, the Druid loves to use from time to time. But you can see Remedy is going quite wide, but has already run out of most of the cards in hand. The gas seems to be used up here, and Jumpy Lion's happy to go through with another Shroud of Concealment here to draw a little bit more extra cards and have some options in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that last turn from Remedy seemed to answer in some ways what the theory was I was asking about, because like we saw that holding onto the Druid of the Reef allowed Remedy to sort of maybe tech to the correct choice, go for that Rush Shark to make sure that you clean up the Null instead of it being able to eat multiple low attack minions. And then by holding the 2 Treants, like, yeah, okay, you theoretically lose out on some Treant damage, but you got a buff on the Vicious Slither Spear for the spellcast on a turn when it could actually attack, whereas the prior turn it was still summoning 6. So there is some upside to it, but boy, you're very glad to see Jerry Rig Carpenter off the top, because like you said, you're running out of gas, and this card is one of the couple. It's sort of like, you know, what this game in this deck, what serves for a draw engine, but it's particularly powerful. Almost always drawing one of these cards that buffs your team. Without that, this game was going downhill fast. But Remedy now just about staying on track and putting on enough pressure that Jumpy Lion will be forced to acknowledge this board and commit time and resources to clearing it out instead of just ignoring the little tokens and accelerating towards the combo.
Yeah, no Sin Stones available at this moment in time for Jumping Lion. He's already used both of his Shrouds as well. He does have most of the pieces of the puzzle for Miracle Rogues to pull off the Miracle, but again, you want to have a little bit of extra mana in that pot when you do it, right? It's kind of hard for you to drop it through. I don't think he's got a preparation available for the time being, so he can't actually drop down that Edwin and then follow up through afterwards to sort of generate some more value, but looks like it is literally going to be just typical spells being used for the time being. The Necrolord dropping down as well to get a release of some extra attack. Not the biggest blade that we've seen. 3, still pretty nice, I guess you could say, on the back end. That should allow Jumping Lion to clear the board, and it's going to be up to Remedy now to somehow refill it afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of blade, this is the kind of Meldrax's Dagger, Necrolord Draka play you make when you're desperately trying to figure out how am I going to pull ahead on value, right? Because just in this, what matters right now is what your cards contribute in terms of board presence and ability to clear the board. And so getting Draka, which is a 3/4 minion, as well as the 3/3 Dagger, is definitely the most value you're going to get at this early stage without completely emptying your hand or otherwise sort of messing up your chances to win even more. But it certainly doesn't feel great when your opponent has a 3/5 Vicious Slither Spear and you are still obviously taking face damage to clear away these tokens.
That is a nice top deck on the Edwin. That is a very nice. A lot of options available here.
It's not quite as good as it would be if you were against a slightly slower deck, because like certainly a very large Edwin you could easily get bopped, but you know, their chances of winning are still greater when Edwin is, you know, helping them draw through their deck like this. So
there we go. Very interesting. And so I just realized that I kind of thought, ooh, is he actually going to get the benefit of using the card draw and getting the battle cry if he was to actually equip that Blackwater Cutlass after drawing another card? And he does get it. That Edwin does get a little bit bigger. So that's 7/7 on the back end there as well, which gives him a little bit of extra here. But of course, Remedy doesn't really care now about actually dealing with the Edwin. I feel at this point, it's all resources go to the face. If you can deal, of course, with the captain, everyone else just
look at this null go, Mendrix.
Yeah, but the null's doing work there, like you said.
Yeah,
this allows him to
Jumpy Lion, more like Jumpy Hyena.
True.
Back on the board, back in a hand, into your minion, back to my hand, onto the board. Aquatic form, hoping to dig something up.
That's a good top deck.
Pretty good.
I'll get the Jerry Carpenter. Yep. He also just keep on doing that. This is
how much damage is this? You've got Herald of Nature. That's charged. So that's 1 extra. Oh, we hit. Okay, that's unfortunate. It's not. I'm not going to say this is out and out like game over at this point, but Jumpy Lion definitely going to get another turn to clear away Remedy's board. And at this point, Remedy, even with this wider board of minions available and your opponent down to a very low 5 hit points, you must be shaking your head a little that you didn't get a spell off Jerry Rig Carpenter that immediately contributed to your damage.
Yeah, a little bit of that, but it's still, you know, this is still a lot of pressure that Jumping Lion needs to worry about. Only 5 life left on the board there. The other thing you have to take into account as well is Remedy still has 27 life. I don't see Jumping Lion. I mean, look, it is Miracle Rogue. Sometimes the miracles are pretty big here. You can see Jumping Lion's thinking about how much damage he can actually pull out right now. 27 life is a lot to chew through in one hit, and I think it needs to clear the board of Remedy. As you can see,
absolutely needs to go for a clear.
Yeah, and the clear seems to be well and truly the choice at this moment in time. So
very nice
on Jumping Lion keeping this. It is nice to get that guard in the city as well. So as you can see, it gets a little bit of extra armor, 8 effective health off the back end. And that means it's going to be nice as well to have that taunt that needs to be chewed through before Remedy can actually attack the face.
This is the beginning of the way back in, but this is still brutal. Your opponent has a Grasping Roots that you know about. You've at least made it hard for them to get through the Naga Centaur in one turn. Depending on what they pull off this aquatic form and off the draw, that's good for Jumpy Lion to see, even though Crooked Cook represents more card draw. Anything that doesn't represent immediate damage is good, and this is such a difficult choice for Remedy, right? Like, obviously, at this point in the game, you're running low on resources. You'd love to go for one of the minions, but you do need the Pride's Fury here. You need to be able to push damage past this 2/3 Naga Centaur. Your opponent still has a ton of cards in hand, and you are basically out of juice at this point. but you'll be able to... Oh, no mana. Okay, so I was hoping that part of the plan here is, well, if you can get a Shapeshift off and Grasping Roots together, that's 3 damage. You can get a crucial extra card draw off your Cook, but has to settle for nothing there, because down to just 1 mana, not worth firing off the Grasping Roots just by itself, but you have cleared away that irregular taunt. Man, that Guard of the City could prove so pivotal here, Mendrix.
Yeah, it definitely saved, I feel, Jumping Lion's face there quite a fair bit. Still has that big 7-5 on play here. Of course, that will be enough to actually deal with that Crooked Cook, meaning no extra value was actually brought out from it. And then the Astra of the Masquerade coming down. There's nothing special coming out of this card. Of course, the special factor of this card is the start of the game, so it's still just a 3-2 body for a decent price. Off the back end here, you can see now, finally, Jumping Lion's managed to completely clear the board away. Remedy has absolutely no gas left. And now it seems that perhaps the turner has been turned for Jumping Lion, but you have to wait and see what ends up being drawn here. And that's definitely not what Remedy wants. This is definitely slowed down quite a fair bit.
I mean, we've seen a lot of decks be able to put away opponents from this low health before, but this is maybe the one deck sort of in the meta where you actually feel okay in this position as Jumpy Lion. Even though you've spent so many of your resources already, like basically most of your win cons in your deck, a lot of your gas in hand, a lot of your damage spells have all been expended just to keep the board clear and keep your health, just barely alive. But this Druid deck is so anemic. You've already dealt with both Crooked Cooks. There's like a peasant left in the deck in terms of card draw. And at this point, I think the only top deck you're afraid of really is Planted Evidence, because it's such a wild card, right? It could be any Druid spell. But aside from that, like, it's just a pile of 1-drops by and large. You've already seen both Jerry-Rig Carpenters. The level of explosiveness that can come out in an individual draw step for Remedy is basically nil. And so even with Jumpy Lion on about 8 life and with a handful of not much, yeah, you just fire off this Serrated Bone Spike. You just have to keep clearing the board clear. Just keep playing Whack-A-Mole. But at this point, you've whacked most of the moles. You just got to kind of hope that you don't draw a couple more pure air rogue cards. Eventually, maybe you get to find a Sinstone Graveyard and use these for something more than just removal. But any turn... Oh, this is it. This is such a good time to draw it as well. If the board got any more developed for Jumpy Lion, this might not be enough. But the absolute perfect top deck for Remedy, and that's a great spell to find off at Mendrix. Flipper Friends could represent a lot of damage. He just has to consider, what do you actually want? I think the Otters are the pretty clear choice here. The Rogue deck, no AoE clear at all.
Let's see what ends up being the choice. So that will be the 6 Otters as well. Brings everything up to the plate here. Will, of course, take a little bit of damage there because it wants to actually save most of these Otters if possible. Unless you just get that 1 damage of the hit there. And I guess the next thing that you're hoping for off the back of it is, of course, to be able to charge up these Otters next, and then that way you can then go towards the face. So Jumping Lion needs to obviously deal with this. Let's see what was the card that was top decked. It's going to be the Shadow Step. Completely useless, considering you've got no minions to return to hand. The Prep Duck can't do much here. The Backstab is a bit useless here, but it looks like he's going to at least attack for the time being as well. We'll pop a little bit of extra damage from the back end. We'll also
I think you have to backstab one of these.
He's not doing it, I don't think. I feel like you would. You don't want to, but I feel like you do.
Yeah, this is a brutal situation, and look at that. Is that the other? Really? Straight off the top. Okay. Goes to Soul of the Forest. There were basically no bad choices there, but this is the nail in the coffin now. I think it may actually be beyond reach for Jumpy Lion. A truly rotten sequence of draws. Jumpy really pulling it out there in terms of that initial board clear, but then unfortunately just so much was used in the defense. I expected the Rogue deck to rally back better with some cards in hand, but you look at all of these spells, they are so bad in the current context. And
the other thing as well, the Death Rattle off the back end as well.
Now it is too late, Mendrix. Yeah, unfortunately, they should have used the backstab last turn, but at this point it wouldn't have made a difference, right? The fact that the 1/1s can become 2/2s, you just don't have the time to draw any real cards, and now we sort of see a desperate flail from Jumpy Lion, considering the options, trying to trade away the cards to find something. There's a Sinstone Graveyard, but it's a turn too late to dig that up. If this had come any earlier at all, Mendrix, it's kind of heartbreaking to see, but
yeah, you can see that he's played most of it. It's going to produce a decent-sized ghost. Not a big ghost, not a small ghost, but a decent-sized one.
showing you this is my hand. Check out how useless all these cards were, and consider yourself very lucky. I've definitely had that kind of turn before. It's like, in case you were wondering if I lagged out or I forgot how my cards work, I didn't. I just had the worst spells on Earth.
Yeah,
so,
everything possible there. Unfortunately, the draw was just not in the favor of jumping line at that point. But to be fair, Remedy did have a bit of a moment there where it's like, oh, is it going to be enough? And to be honest, when you said that planted evidence really was going to be the big change that could possibly bring it back for Remedy, it definitely was their Remedy. That was really good for them in that scenario. As we can see here, Remedy will be the one to take away that first win. Jumping Line still has opportunities, of course, to win this one out. Still needs to win with the Rogue, still needs to win with the Warlock. What's left here for Remedy is literally going to be their Warlock, and they've got some bunch of imps that they want to jump into. It's going to be the typical one as well that we've seen from time to time, the typical tech that we would expect to have from a Warlock. Jumping Line is the one, or Jumpy Line is the one that has something a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, when we say typical, right, no two of these lists, or very rarely are two of these lists exactly the same. Even in these sort of, we'll say, more one-dimensional, focused, aggressive imp refarm lists, some people don't play the Grimoire of Sacrifice. It sort of runs a bit counter to the rest of the deck, being a board clear spell that actually sacrifices your own minions. Others, split the copies of things. Like, this deck is only running a single Demonic Assault, others run two. Some people don't play the Sea Giant, they find a different spell for that slot or a different card. But yeah, compared to Jumpy Lion's list, this is much more orthodox, and we'll be seeing it go up against the Rogue again here. Jumpy Lion just choosing to run it back instead and hoping that their luck will be a little bit better this time. And it is Mendrix, it is, because there is not one, but two Sinstone Graveyards. The second one a little superfluous, but having that Sinstone Graveyard early on, I mean, we've talked to death already today about how important that is for this deck.
Absolutely right. The fact that you're able to actually draw what you need right off the bat, get those decent ghosts right onto the field immediately. And the other thing to take into account as well is Remedy's actually running a bit slow as well. Does have the Impending Catastrophe, does have the Fiendish Circle, so has ways to really create some crazy draws around turn 5.
Ooh.
But as you can also see, what's also nice there, has that Sea Giant in hand already as well. So if there is a massive build-up of all these mobs straight off the bat, you can see things getting a bit crazy. But that's already off the board, a very big imp at 5/5. So you can see just using that Vial Library early to, of course, get the benefit of bumping up the imps afterwards.
Yeah, Jumpy Lion making a decision last turn, had pause and tank for a while to think, did they want to play out a Wild Paw Null for 2, or did they want to hold on to it? Of course, as soon as you play any card, including those Nulls, it's the Rogue class, it dispenses with your disguise, and then you sort of can't discount the Nulls anymore. And so the difference between having a Null on the field last turn and 2 Nulls on the field this turn, not that great in the end. But yeah, seeing this 5/5 imp out there has certainly made them feel a little bit less good. As much as you can say that about what feels like a close to optimal opener for Jumpy Lion, and Jumpy Lion understands exactly what the goal is. They don't just play 2 Wild Paw Nulls, they go in for the Sinstone Graveyard off the coin, turning the coin usage early into an upside. Maximum tempo gameplay, a 6/6 stealth on turn 3. That was 2 3/5s with Rush and a 6/6 stealth all deployed on turn 3 on the same turn, and you've still got another use of that graveyard to go. This deck is so powerful and explosive, Mendrix.
Yeah, you can see right off the bat there is able to make that draw coming through it, as you mentioned, and it needs to have that, right? Because we've talked about these imps, they need to be contested. You can't just leave them up from time to time, but Remedy is quite happy to begin thinking about the future, decides to play things out a little bit differently, goes for a bit of a summon up of extra imps off the back end, and at the same time uses that Impending Catastrophe at the same time to actually get themselves one hell of a hand to play with. Of course, also has an Imp King Refarm there as well, which means this will be guaranteed to at least be infused to come around turn 6 when you can play it on curve, which is going to be nicely for Remedy. And as you can see, as mentioned, put out a little bit of extra damage here from that Vial Library as well. So has just flipped over towards the other side, has a strong board here. Jumping Lion, of course, has a strong board themselves, so at least has something to deal with what Remedy's put onto the board.
Yeah, I mean, this is a funny little game to watch. Like, when you're talking about like which deck beats which deck in a matchup, it's not necessarily talking about, 2 theoretically optimal draws and like the ideal situation, because that happens so rarely, especially for both players in the same game. But I think Mendrix, we're pretty close to that this game, right? Like, Jumpy Lion building such a board so early and completely taking control away from the imp deck can't really expect that to happen most of the time. At the same time, Remedy here with an infused Imp King Reform ready on turn 4, having, fully taxed the abilities of Jumpy to clear even with that early play, and with more gas still to go. I'm a little bit sad to see that Sea Giant still stuck in hand after last turn. There wasn't really any room to sequence it in, but it got pretty discounted there for a second. Still, if you fire off the Fiendish Circle here, you can at least throw down that 8/8. And it'll feel not so good anymore now. Like, obviously, your opponent's already traded away most of the life on their minions. So if they, in some ways, if they get to slam those in to a Sea Giant, it feels like you lost some value somewhere. But really, Remedy just needs to get these ghosts and nulls off the board. And yeah, I am glad that we see that played out beautifully. Sequences it, uses the library to the maximum, and then clears the spot from that location. Plays the 8/8 as well. So unfortunately, because Jumpy Lion's board is so strong with double Sinstone Graveyard, they're actually able to just go minion for minion here and match Remedy. But knowing that you have that Imp King still in hand and a bit more gas besides, Remedy won't be given up just yet.
Yeah, Remedy's still in a decent position considering everything being said and done. And when you look at the size of Jumping Lion, they've already used up again, we know we've used up their Nulls, they've already used up both of their Sin Stones. The next real big play that they're going to have is obviously going to be off the back of a Necrolord or in combination with an Edwin. And then that's kind of everything that you expect to see from this Miracle Rogue deck. So we've already used a lot of that big arsenal in play here. Same for Remedy. Not to say that Remedy doesn't really, hasn't also been using up some of these big tech cards as well as the back end, but I just feel like right now that impending catastrophe that Remedy used early means they have so much more gas at a more critical point in time. And you can see Jumping Lion's feeling a little bit stressed off the back of this as well, taking a bit of extra damage to the face, but is trading out quite effectively.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's sort of whether Jumpy Lion is just one of those players who likes to sort of use the rope and make sure that they're not making any decisions in an overly hurried fashion, or whether they just maybe don't have as much experience with all of the different scenarios in this rogue deck. Maybe it's one you picked up more recently because it's hit the meta. But we are noticing like a lot of these critical turns are going to time, and obviously it's one of the most complicated decks you can be playing right now. But it is still like, it can be costly because, again, those decisions are very meaningful, and you can't even really make all of them ahead of time. It is one of those decks where the turns kind of evolve in some cases, especially with cards like Edwin available. So to see Jumpy Lion, running up against the time limit on these turns certainly adds an element of suspense. Remedy further contributing to the tension by just applying damage to face and creating another wide board to be dealt with. And at this point, even though Jumpy Lion has been careful to not actually lose any of these minions here and has been like trading them off against the smaller imps by preference, I feel as though you may, at some point you needed to clear these, the 8/8 giant, the 7/7 imp. I mean, if nothing else, so you have room to make more ghosts from your two graveyards, but also to not be dying.
Yeah, you could tell Jumping Lion was of the opinion that Remedy needed to actually slam one of their big minions into that 6/1 ghost that was there beforehand. Remedy said, no, just going to use my Demonic Assault, get myself a few extra Void Walkers off the back and actually preserve their life totals. And going to face now has really given a bit of a pause here for Jumping Lion. Hasn't actually made a choice yet, and now we've hit the tether. Needs to actually jump into the mix and actually cause that damage as soon as possible. And it needs to be a board clear, because to be honest, it is literally going to be lethal
running out of
term if there is these big boys to left onto the board.
Oh my god, okay, we're just...
Yeah, he's just going
choosing death by Sea Giant there. Probably wasn't a way out of that one. We didn't even get to see the infused Imp King Reform. That's how definitive that one was. And against such a strong opener from Jumpy Lion as well. But again, I think what we're seeing why, at least in some cases where the opponent isn't putting out as much board pressure, we see those rogue decks sometimes just taking their lumps and dropping to very low life totals very early on. Because if you burn that gas early to too much, as we saw there, or just have the wrong, not as much gas, too many Sinstone Graveyards and Nulls, then how do you follow up, right? Because you do need to then close the game out in a reasonable fashion as that rogue deck. It doesn't really have staying power when so many cards in the deck, as we saw in that first game, tend to not do much in a lot of context, Mendrix. So I think what we just saw there is that you need to strike a fine balance between defending yourself against these decks and making your best defense a good offense.
And this is something that I think we both needed to see as well, and everyone that's watching, because we've been talking about these rogue decks just being so strong throughout the competition once their presence was made known. And now we finally get to see, there is actually a way to get in. There are some Achilles heels, I guess you could say, to actually exploit from this particular deck. And it's good to see that, yes, there is a way for these actual aggro decks to come through, and probably why they're so popular at this moment in time, and they have the ability to find these weaknesses when, of course, the card draws just don't seem to be there. That being said, Jumping Line isn't out of it just yet. Still has opportunities, of course, to qualify here. This is going to be a round robin between the women's group here, so plenty of options for all of them to jump into that. And we'll be moving to a quick break before we bring you back more of that action, so do not go anywhere. And we are back with the ANZ Hearthstone Open presented by Blizzard and AEL. Thank you very much for your patience. We're ready to jump right back into the action. Of course, I believe we do have next up to step to the plate will be Remedy up against Miss Golden Duck this time around. So let's see what they can bring to the table. Before we do jump into that action, of course, we do need to give a quick shout out to the sponsors. Of course, McDonald's Australia bringing us all of the highlights of the competition. Let us know in chat which ones you actually want to see by throwing in there "I am loving it." And from there, we'll be able to check out, put something onto AEO socials at the end of the day. And of course, Mate and Internet Mobile, who are being sponsors to us with a couple of giveaways. Hashtag Let's Be Mates. Throw that into chat and be in the running to win 2 card packs valued at $3.95. Be sure to check out all of the options and upgrade your services today. So, Bard, how are you feeling about this next one coming into it? Of course, we had the privilege of watching Remedy come in beforehand. She was managing to get a win up against Jumping Lion. Now it's up to Ms. Golden Duck to see what she can do against Remedy.
I'm always very excited to see a bit more variety in the deck list, right? And we saw some exciting, fast-paced mirrors in that last match, as well as our New Zealand qualifier finals this morning. And, but, time for a bit of variety. Ms. Golden Duck showing up with a bit of a contrarian take on the meta as it stands right now with some slower decks, including I think the most expensive version of Skeleton Mage we've seen thus far in a good month of Hearthstone. There are so many legendaries here, so clearly just flashing around Ms. Golden Duck. Maybe the golden in that name is alluding to a little bit more than just sort of the cute animal. We got some real bling on these decks.
Yeah, I'm having a quick look at what she's chosen, and I can see that she has the usual stuff there: Denathrius, Kel'Thuzad the Inevitable, Modros Fire Eye, but also has the Kel'Thuzad Sin Strider added into it. So definitely an interesting spin flowing into from that one there. She also has the Imkin Warlock, that's the usual stuff that you would expect, and also decided to bring across what seems to be a very different hunter as well: King Crush, Hydraloon, Beastalker, Tavash. Definitely something that we haven't seen throughout this tournament. So excited to see how Remedy decides to get rid of that, and perhaps banning away this hunter might be the best remedy. I'm 100% going to keep using that pun. It is just too easy at this point, I have to say, Bard. Although you can probably you should try to stop me.
I don't have the energy right now, Mendrix. It's not my heart to stop you punning. I think you're onto a good one. You're onto a winner, right? Can't deny it. I'd like to thank every esports player who chooses something sort of vaguely word playable as their tag. It makes our jobs easier. Helps us stay amused throughout the long, hard days of casting.
Very true, very true. Much on that one. I thought you were powered up and ready to roll, but you know what? Sometimes these card games do take it out of you. It's just a lot of mental gymnastics that go into have to go into the machine. I believe Remedy and Ms. Golden Duck are still thinking through which bands they want to get away. So I'm going to have a quick refresh to see what's available on this side. Now, this Hunter, have you had a chance to have a look at this deck to see all that Ms. Golden Duck is bringing?
Well, I had a look. Obviously, this is Big Beast Hunter, right? This is a supported archetype. We just haven't seen it much recently because, of course, this whole Hearthstone Open has taken place immediately post the release of Murder at Castle Nathria that introduced the Wild Seeds and kind of brought things back around. But what I was saving my energy for, right, aside from debating you over wordplay, was just looking up a few more details. Like, for instance, caught my eye, this particular beast list, Mendrix, this is exactly the Beasts of the Deep pre-constructed deck, which I believe is made available through the store. Certainly, if you go to Create Hunter deck, it's one of the 3 pre-con recipes you can choose. Now, last season, if you recall, we did have a couple of players who maybe they didn't have a 3rd deck for their slot, or they just decided to send it, and they showed up with like the core default pre-con that uses only free cards. This is not that. This is like a realer deck. In terms of competitiveness than most of those core recipes are, but it still asks some questions as to, why you've showed up with this deck and not something that's sort of more popular in the meta, a more refined list. Maybe you just don't believe in that sort of net decking, or maybe you don't have all the requisite cards. Maybe you spent all your dust making this mage list.
Very true, right? Because as you can see, that is the one that's definitely got most of the resources poured into it. So unfortunately for Miss Duck, or Miss Golden Duck in this scenario, that was actually banned away by Remedy. On the flip side, Miss Golden Duck decided to ban out her priest. So that means Remedy has to pilot the Druid and of course the Warlock. In this scenario here, Ms. Golden Duck is going to be using that Hunter, that big beast Hunter that you're referencing as well, and of course that Imp Warlock that has seen so much play. And it looks like we're going to be jumping into it.
Yeah, really interesting to see the ban still going towards that priest deck, even with 2 slower decks available, right? Like previously, I sort of made it understood. My understanding was that the priest ban was because of how effective it is against these aggressive decks that put a lot of minions into play. I didn't think it would have been that effective against the hunter necessarily, but you can't be sure. Can't be too sure when you're dealing with these things, and you certainly don't want to give them an easy matchup against your warlock. Might let Remedy just kind of steal a win here, and of course, when you only need 2 wins to secure first place in this qualifier, you have to be careful about giving Remedy anything at all.
Exactly right. That literally is the scenario that we have unfolding before us. Remedy can walk away with that first slot in terms of that qualifier, so you definitely want to be able to get through and stop that from happening. Ms. Golden Duck, of course, wants to walk away with the $50, put that in her pocket instead. So very nice to have that sort of scenario come into play here. Of course, you do want to place well and just sort of send a bit of a message coming into the top 16. Let's be honest here, right, Bud?
Oh, of course, right? We've already talked about how several of our players have really kind of established themselves as threats coming in. Obviously, everyone in the top 16 is going to be a pretty qualified player, but some of them are looking especially menacing. And, you know, maybe some people want to try and fly under the radar, but I think for the most part, people like to strut their stuff. People like to show, you know, how prepared they are for this meta, and especially if you're playing sort of an unusual deck choice, you want to make sure that you give yourself something to believe in going into those top 16. You want a big definitive win and feeling good about your deck choices. Otherwise, you may be up for some soul searching over the next 7 days or so about what deck you might want to play instead.
It's definitely going to be tough. I mean, luckily enough, all the players do have at least 2 weeks to sort of get themselves up and rolling. Who knows, a new meta might come rolling in as well. So a few options available. Ms. Golden Duck has some options there as well. I believe that she just made that choice on the side there. Ramping up quite quickly to go straight to the face. As is typical with these hunters, love to go straight for the face in the scenario, get that damage in there. 16 now for Remedy, so she needs to begin to think about how to actually stem the bleeding, stop all this damage from coming through. Imps seem to be the way, and obviously a Void Walker as well. Nice to have a taunt in the side there, but Ms. Golden Duck, with the fact that she's actually managed to get a pretty good board on hand. These are 3/3 bodies. These poor imps don't really have the power yet to get through, and as you can see there, Remedy wants to assist by actually sacrificing one of these imps to get that board cleared away.
Yeah, I mean, so far Ms. Golden Duck showing off, the power of this this deck. It can be a little bit awkward. The Naga sequence, the Naga cards only have a very slim overlap with like the beast themed side of the deck, and it's the card that we already saw that summons those lionfish. But if you're able to keep the chain of like spell Naga going, there's really nothing wrong with that at all. And now we're getting the combination of Ambassador Phelan into the Dredge from Harpoon Gun. Harpoon Gun, one of the most powerful cards in this archetype. One of the ones that's sometimes stuck around into other hunter lists, even those that have been sort of significantly overhauled to deal with the new meta and incorporate new cards. That Dredge is just so strong. And with Ambassador Phelan, again, this is a bit of a hit or miss card, but when you have that combination to get the Colossal Minions off the bottom of your deck, as we just saw, Remedy has to be kind of, taking stock right now, because you've been put on notice. You're going to be dealing with something really nasty in the next couple of turns.
Yeah, it's going to be very rough in that sense, as you can see there. It's still going to be a 4/5 body at the same time, and Remedy realizes, I need to actually pump up all of the damage if possible here, starting to throw stuff a little bit back in response to it as well. So let's see how Ms. Golden Duck responds. Has got that Hydralion ready. This is what you're talking about. That notice now has well and truly come to sing. And Ms. Golden Duck is wasting no time. We'll pop that right into play here. And as we can see, it's going to be that Hydralion heads ready to rumble.
We don't quite have enough mana for the maximum disrespect play, which is you run the Devouring Swarm out and you try and bounce the Hydralodon back to hand, and you reset all their heads, and you just end up with enough head rush damage to kill any board basically. But it's also not necessary because this is happening on turn 5. So even after you hit the bartender buff, right? That's the game plan for this imp deck. You had a pretty sizable board, and somehow you're still miles behind in this position. Obviously, this Hydrolodon has done its best work by now, but that is often enough, right? These colossal minions, we haven't actually seen a lot of them in the current meta. Again, they're just one of those things that cycled out of favor. People mostly can't find a place for them, but they are very powerful when you hit the stuff. You have them on their terms, right?
And this is absolutely on Ms. Golden Duck's turns. You can see quite happy to go to face down to finish everything off there. Remedy knew she was cooked at that moment in time and decided to push through to the next level, even live tapping at that initial point here. And things looking pretty good here now for Ms. Golden Duck. If she's able to actually beat Remedy, looking in a really good position to actually go up against Jumping Lion, waiting in the wings. So that's going to be a really nice feeling for Ms. Golden Duck, if she's able to actually come out with those 2 wins off the back end.
Yeah, exciting to see that the Hunter Precon deck that's playing like literally no new cards at all can still kind of easily handle one of the more frightening aggro decks in the meta. I mean, obviously that was a pretty slick sequence of spells. That was how you wanted to draw it up, but you know, that's the nature of these tournaments. That one win could be, you know, the key to unlocking a path forward in this event. You could easily find your way into first place from the qualifiers just through that, because now that Hunter deck has already been successfully retired from the match, you're back to the much more tried and true, and I would argue more consistent Imp Warlock deck. Even though we did just see an Imp Warlock list lose to that Hunter, you know, you still feel very confident in the deck that you've brought.
Absolutely, and again, looking into this, we know that with these decks, though, when it comes to these Imp Warlock variants and what they actually bring as well, sometimes it is just going to be a coin flip in terms of what's being brought to it. Both of them will be mirroring each other, 2 Flame Imps right off the back. So let's see what actually comes into play here as well. We do get a Imp Gang boss. I believe the Demonic Assault into perhaps just some of those Void Walkers might be the initial play here, but he's happy to just trade away for the time being. Actually, I say that Demonic Assault is going to be on turn 4. Never mind that in that sense there. So just trade that through, get the Wicked Shipment, and of course pump up a little bit of extra board for the time being. Having a look now to see what Ms. Golden Duck has on hand. I don't think there's anything too crazy to start off with. We'll be Flush with Librarian maybe into a coin of some kind, or just a Wicked Shipment, I guess.
Yeah, you don't necessarily want to commit the Librarian until you can play it alongside some Imps. Like, if you would have played it on the early turns, obviously it would have just been gobbled up by that opposing Flame Imp. But I do like that rather than rushing into that combination play early and burning your coin to do it, Ms. Golden Duck is happy, even in this, you know, drag race of the matchup, to just take it slow, play on curve, and hold that coin. I think it is very essential for decks like this to use the coin, not just in most situations to power out, you know, 2 mana play on turn 1 and get the aggro rolling. You're so dependent on using cards in combination that the ability to fire off, say, Fiendish Circle and then coin and have mana to play Impending Doom like immediately, that is what will break a game open. And we haven't seen that Impending Doom yet, which we've noted can be an issue, but we do now have the option to coin into the Bartender if we so wish. The only choice then is, do you perhaps instead want to go for Bloodbound Imp into Vile Library? The fact that there's 2 Voidwalkers in play, though, I think you just probably need to slam the Bartender. I don't think you can afford to waste a turn where you're leaving most of these imps as just 1/1s, because your opponent easily mops them up with the existing board. You're even giving them imps through the Imp Gang boss, which is like a card that basically is never good in this deck except for this mirror, I feel like sometimes, but this is certainly the situation you wanted in. And Ms. Golden Duck opts for a third option, just slams the Mischievous Imp. So, I mean, 3 Mischievous Imps is a lot of imp power. It does kind of get around the danger of not committing to clearing Remedy's board, which is allowing Remedy to clear yours, obviously more efficiently with trades of her choice. But I have to wonder still, how many cards would be left with when this turns over? Will that Shady Bartender and Vile Library still be worth anything? Because Remedy not only has now the pick of attacks that they want to make, but Grimoire of Sacrifice is in hand, so there is a potential for unexpected board clear here. You basically just have to mop up the 3/3s, and it looks like that's what's going to happen. Hitting with the Imp Gang boss gives you that 1 extra imp, so you'll have that as fire, as fuel for the fire of Grimoire of Sacrifice. So now, if you just, choosing to trade off the Taunt Voidwalkers to preserve at least 1 imp in play, as if you needed more proof of how important every imp is to the success of this deck. And that means that's quite a blow from this Golden Duck, because there was a lot of imps just returning to the Shadow Realm right there.
You can tell Miss Golden Duck was going for a bit of a gamble. She thought, cool, if I can get a massive wide board down and then I'm able to follow up with the Via Library or follow up with the Bartender, I can get some really good value. And Remedy, of course, wanted none of that noise. Decided she would get rid of everything on that board, like Grimmer Sacrifice. Quite a good top deck, I must admit, to get as well. And you could tell that was immediately the thought process of Remedy afterwards, thinking through, okay, how much damage, what can I preserve to get this Grimmer Sacrifice out, and of course, get myself in position to start controlling the board, because now Remedy's the one with a bit of gas in hand, whereas Ms. Golden Duck, she's actually running on fumes now, only has the coin and the Shady Bartender, which of course is going to be nice, but now things are really beginning to heat up, and you can tell Remedy's putting out there a lot of resources and going blind.
Yeah, you mentioned the coin flip, Mendrix, but as a mutual fan of metaphors, I'm a big fan of the drag race one here, because this is the kind of thing where Ms. Golden Duck got out to an early lead, but then you press your luck a little too far and your engine explodes. You're not at the finish line left, and now it looks like Remedy is just surging past. Although, look at this tech card, right? We said these lists are similar, not identical. Ms. Golden Duck seemingly a little behind where the meta is, still running a lot of these cut. I shouldn't say a lot of, but like the one of Smothering Starfish, one of Blade Master Akani is sort of like synergy breakers, combo breakers that stop your opponent from overpowering your board, and that was the peak time to draw that Starfish, really potentially redeeming the situation. Obviously not out of the woods just yet, still behind in terms of raw bodies, and what a top deck from Remedy. Right back at you, draws into this. This is what I did with my tech slots. Thank you very much. It's a Sea Giant. Goes to the life tap first, though, and wow!
What a draw.
Okay, just have it all.
Yeah, that's it. I feel like you can tell Remedy's counting now. Do I have enough damage to actually just go straight to the face here? Because you can literally go Shady Bartender with the Vile Library into one. That's what, 2-2. Well, we have to just.
The Vile Library, I think, is on cooldown this turn.
Oh, yeah. So we'll just check to see that. We've got 3.
I don't. It's not lethal now. I think the count is, can my opponent kill me?
That's what I'm thinking.
So if you do not fear any source of lethal from this Golden Duck, there's an argument that you go face with this. But okay, decided to hit the Imp, which makes sense, right? Like you deny the Imp value to your opponent. Yeah,
from the Vile Library.
And now you're happy to settle for setting up 2-turn lethal, but it costs you some damage.
Alright, so I'm checking to see what seems to be the play here now. We've got a Demonic Assault in hand that can set up a bit more time for Ms. Golden Duck. The impending catastrophe is there as well. And Ms. Golden Duck says, nah, not going to bother, not going to have it. You'll have enough to actually kill me in that next turn. There was counting a little bit quicker than us. So that means that we will be moving to a 1-1 all in that scenario here. Let's have a quick look now what decks are actually going to be left there. So I believe it was Remedy won with the Warlock. Ms. Golden Duck has one with the Hunter. So both of them now have one apiece. We know that for a fact. It's going to be the Druid up against the Warlock here.
Game. Yeah.
So definitely, again, it feels like it's going to be 2 aggro's here. Maybe not so much of a coin flip, because I believe this Druid is still performing very well in the open ladder. I believe you had a quick look at the meta for the open ladder just recently, and I believe you said it was actually the Hunter that's really ranked.
Oh, I more was commenting. The Hunter is one of the stronger decks. It's more my surprise to see that I mean, maybe I shouldn't be surprised so much that a variant of Big Beast Hunter, even a core one, was back in the tournament, since that deck has suddenly found a resurgence. Not that much surprise. It plays a lot of big rush minions, pretty good at board control, good set of tools. But no, I believe if you check, the Ramp Druid is still the top win rate. Big Spell Mage, Control Shaman, or Evolve Shaman, actually. This might be an aggro variant. We haven't seen any of this. Yeah, never mind. That is the aggro version of the deck. But yeah, so it seems like the meta overall, apart from Big Spell Mage and Ramp Druid, which have some of the best board control and just such overwhelming late game, I think people have identified that these decks that we've been mostly seeing in the tournament kind of don't go far enough one way or the other in terms of their pace. Now, granted, though, that is for ladder play, right? When you've got 3 decks available, it completely changes the maths. So you can't take those ladder stats as gospel. However, I think it's safe to say that this Druid deck has been advantaged against the Warlock deck in all but the most extreme scenarios. It's just more consistent in getting this board out early. And when you have this kind of hand from his Golden Duck, I didn't see what the mulligan was, but this is definitely not what she was hoping for. Although, one Fiendish Circle draw is all it takes to fix it, and that's the top deck. That's the card you had faith in drawing. And
speaking of top decks,
now... Well, I mean, you had the one in hand, right? But, like, with no impending doom, I'd be hesitant to just fire that off, because I can't buff most of my imps, my opponent has a board, my imps might just get cleared away, and then what do I do? Even if I draw impending doom, I've got nothing, my refarm can't get infused. But when you have both Fiendish Circles, like, it's by far your most powerful token-making spell. 4/1/1s for 3 is crazy just on the face of it, Mendrix, for stats distributed across bodies. And against any deck that plays a slimmer board itself than this Druid, you would struggle to clear them all in one turn. But now, with the Vial Library in hand, the second Fiendish Circle there to reload with, you feel confident forcing your opponent to pay attention to your board instead of your face, and you still know you've got the gas for when you draw into something big later on.
And Remedy's line there feels very interesting as well. It drops down that Crooked Cook, also goes for that. I think he's able to get the extra draw. That was the whole point there. Actually just get that extra bit of damage onto Miss Golden Duck and actually push that on through. So you can see now Miss Golden Duck needs to actually focus onto these minions as well. So she's trying to at least slim down this board of Remedy. But Remedy's... What I was saying, one of the things the top deck before was actually getting that Pride's Fury. It wasn't the best top deck now that I think about it, of course, couldn't be played on curve, but what's really nice is that means that if this board does stay quite wide here for Remedy, these are going to be some very empowered minions in terms of the fact that you've actually got on hand the Peasant, you got the Crooked Cook, of course you got the Playmaster Akani. I imagine that must have been a spell
That's on spell.
counter.
It's on spell.
Counter. So this needs to be played.
This is the perfect advert for that card, right? Like, this is a card that not everyone is playing. I think it feels pretty awkward as a 4-mana 2/6 in this Warlock deck when you draw it instead of anything that's actually synergistic with your game plan. But this is the exact scenario that you put it in the deck for, right? It's because you are vulnerable to overcommitting and getting punished by just some big spell-based clear. And so even though Remedy can kind of tell, we could immediately tell, Remedy could immediately tell what that Akani was doing, there's still no real way around it. You have to throw out a dummy spell, and at the very least it delays that lethal Pride's Fury by a turn. That said, though, there's just so much in hand. You're still able to get a small pump across the board. And with the lead the Remedy already had, it's getting to the point now where Ms. Golden Duck will find it very hard to come back, right? We've sort of seen it before. If you get pushed this far onto the back foot, even if you make a really large imp or several very large minions, you're mostly just forced to trade them off for tiny tokens one at a time and never go face, which is a losing proposition, no matter how good it looks for you at the outset.
Yeah, definitely interesting to see how this play is going to actually go out, what the results will be between our two competitors. Of course, Remedy at this moment in time has a win under their belt, which means if she is able to actually clear out Miss Golden Duck now, will actually take that first place qualification, and it'll be up to Miss Golden Duck and of course Jumping Line to actually find out who will take that last slot in the qualification. Here comes that Pride's Fury, lots of damage into the mix, and you can tell Miss Golden Duck knows that is a well play. That is a lethal amount of damage coming on through here as well. So Remedy...
Yeah, Remedy...
Yep.
Expert demonstration of that matchup, right? We said Druid was favored, and that's exactly why. Even Miss Golden Duck even had like sort of the appropriate counter in some ways at the appropriate time, and it still wasn't enough because the Druid deck was so far in front that you could afford to basically ruin your plan for that turn to bait out the secret, to bait out the activation of the Akani, and then still have the Pride's Fury next turn, still with a wide enough board to easily get the dub. So good team composition there to create a situation where your opponent can't ban away all your favorable matchups. Great play as well to capitalize on those matchups, and your reward first place qualification through from this women's qualifier bracket into our top 16 in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, definitely a big congratulations to throw out there as well, but we still have some more Hearthstone action coming up. We still have one more slot to give away, and of course, that will be decided between Ms. Golden Duck and Jumping Lion. So guys, we're moving to a quick break. Please do not go anywhere. And welcome back to the ANZ Hearthstone Open presented by Blizzard and AEL. Hope you guys had a fantastic break there, grabbed yourself a drink, ready to jump back into the action. And of course, it is going to be up against the Jumping Lion and Ms. Golden Duck. Whoever is able to take away this slot here or actually manages to get the victory in this match will be decided as our second place representative for the women's group. So things are getting very exciting. Bard, how are you feeling about this one?
I'm thrilled, Mendrix. You couldn't ask for a better crescendo. The final match of our entire qualifier season here for this Hearthstone Open. We've been through so much with so many different competitors, and a lot of them we've already, happily sort of handed their ticket to the champion stage, but we still have to decide one more place, an elimination match to send it off. Obviously, only one of these players can go through, and that's a little bit of a tragedy, but it will be fun to find out which of them it is. So, I think we're only, seconds away from potentially having that ready to go.
Yeah, I think the bands are still coming through for the time being. While they are getting that sorted out, of course, doing their warm-up match, let's have a quick shout-out to the sponsors. Of course, we need to thank McDonald's Australia for bringing us all of the highlights of the competition. Make sure you let us know that you're loving it out there by throwing in "I'm loving it" in chat, and we'll capture some of the best moments that you can have a bit of a checkout at the end of the show. And of course, there is also their quarter pounder range on at the moment. You can get yourself a fresh twist of lettuce and lemon thrown in, or perhaps some mouth-watering bacon. And we also get to announce the winner of our Let's Be Mates competition here now. It's going to be Dover 8. Congratulations on winning the 2 card packs valued at $3.95. And guys, there's still going to be more options, more opportunities to actually grab some of those packs throughout the competition when we get towards the top 8 and the top 16 respectively. So make sure you keep throwing out hashtag Let's Be Mates in chat for an opportunity to get those ones and win as well. Apart from that, I think the bans have come through as well. I believe Jumping Lion has decided to ban away Miss Golden Duck's Warlock. On the flip side, Miss Golden Duck has gotten rid of the Priest. So both of these competitors are ready to run. Hopefully we'll find out who will come out on top.
Yeah, no one likes the Priest, Mendrix. Not getting to see any of that today, but I guess that's you can choose to take that positively, right? If you got a lot of haters, it means people care about you, that sort of thing. That's the kind of positive philosophy that we need to rally here. If you're Jumpy Lion in particular, right? Because Jumpy Lion kind of lost in brutal fashion there 2 times on the Miracle Rogue, just kind of getting run over. So maybe that's the motivation behind banning out the Warlock. But going to be interesting to see if Jumpy Lion's able to sneak their own Warlock deck past that Skeleton Mage. The Ping Mage deck has proved brutal for most, if not all, aggro decks that have tried to make their way into the meta at the moment. The Warlock deck does have a hope, I think, just because your potential high roll is so high, you can make a board of imps large enough that even the sort of skeleton explosions can't clear them. But the trade with those minions is so brutal if you're just trying to push damage fairly to the face and you don't have some way to protect against it, especially if you don't have board clear of your own. You have to just sort of let the skeletons bounce into your minions and then explode all over them. It's why we haven't seen much of this mage deck played at all. It's always the one that's banned out, but this time Jumpy Lion is confident. I have to wonder if it's got something to do with those additional expensive legends that we've seen teched in here.
The other thing we can also take into account as well is that Jumping Lion, she does have the rogue that has a way to actually just jump over all of those skeletons. So that could be a thought process going into it. Yeah, I don't want to deal, of course, with the Warlock. On the flip side, I do have something that could possibly get an easy win from that, and that's going to be my rogue coming into it. Miss Golden Duck, she is using, of course, what seems to be that Skeleton Mage. I feel like it's been weeks now since you've actually seen it come back into play because of these aggro decks coming into it and how the meta has just gone for that switch. But both of them do have quite a few legendaries into the mixes of these decks here, so some high-octane action coming into play shortly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the question, especially with this imp deck, the modifications to the mage deck really don't bother me so much because I think that deck's more flexible, right? It's got a few core cards, the ones that actually power up its win conditions. Other than that, it's just sort of a mid-range pile, right? Whichever cards you think are going to help keep you alive and stall the game long enough for Sire or Mordresh or Kel'Thuzad to be lethal, right? Do you want the Sin Strider package to get a bigger combo in the end game with Bran Bronzebeard and one of those big finishes? Do you feel like you need more AoE clear? Do you need some sort of secret package to counter combo decks? Whatever your plan is, you can afford it, right? The 2 solid alibis, some people play them, some people don't. This one does. also a Sir Finley to help fix the draws, right? So, maybe you play one slightly worse card, but you sort of maybe guarantee that you don't have Sire Denathrius stuck near the bottom of your deck for too long to see it infused. We've seen that be sort of the weakness of a couple of control decks over the course of this tournament. But on Jumping Lion side of things, I think it's a more serious consideration when you go chopping and changing like this, because when you put in several additional 8, 6, 10 cost minions, even if some of them like Sea Giant can be discounted, you are messing with your deck's chances of powering out that early imp board that I was just highlighting as a path to victory.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's also interesting about this when we go back to Miss Golden Duck's side, is those solid alibis. We've seen them sort of being funneled out recently into the meta, and she's decided to throw them back in. And I think it is sort of an illustration of that everything has gone very aggro-centric recently, so might as well get yourselves a little bit of extra defenses rather than actually funneling in different tech to counter other controls. So you can really see there is a bit of that step lock cycle between the decks as they go from aggro to control, back to mid-range, back to control, back to aggro. All these little tech choices start to add up over time, and of course, we are in that competition of play. We are jumping into the action, because we can see that the imps are beginning to pile up here for Jumping Lion. She is continuing to just throw everything onto the board here. Has a pretty decent hand. Also has that Sea Giant tech available as well, and an Imp King early, which means we'll be able to have that come out very nicely in curve. So very good for her in that scenario. Going back to the flip side here for Ms. Golden Duck, has a very large hand already onto turn 3. So definitely a lot of explosive action, and I imagine minion clearing in the near future.
Yeah, Sea Giant not exactly at its best here, because the Hunter deck, despite being a Hunter deck, this one doesn't usually have a wide board, but at least you've gotten out to an early lead. That being said, some danger lurking, right? Because you don't quite have the opportunity to convert this into... as I say that. I was about to say you don't have the opportunity to convert this into massive damage yet, because the Sea Giant and Imp King are out of reach, but Vile Library off the top is just what the doctor ordered. Unfortunately, you can't really combo it with the Mischievous Imp. You probably have to choose whether or not you want to fire the Mischievous Imp off now, whether you want to go for the library. The imp seems like the right choice. The library would pretty much give you the same damage as you're about to get off 2 imps next turn. But this Golden Duck does have a neat little combination for the deck here. We saw last turn coined out and deployed the Sharon Saber. It puts Sunken Saber on the bottom of your deck. Sunken Saber, a minion whose a similar minion, right? Rush, Death Rattle, but most importantly, when it slams into something and dies, you summon a beast for free out of your deck. And if you look at where the actual beasts are distributed across the curve of this deck, you're hitting Hydrolon, you're hitting Mountain Bear, you're hitting King Crush. Like, this is what the deck is here to set up. And even though that card is currently stuck on the bottom of the deck, that Pet Collector in hand, I believe, is guaranteed to hit it. There's only one Sharon Saber in the whole deck. So now that that's gone, Pet Collector will pull the Sunken Saber, which will immediately be able to rush. So essentially you have a 5 mana legendary 7 cost base plus rush clear in this little complicated combo. The question is, will that be enough to deal with what is a very fearsome imp board we're about to see, maybe even a giant Imp Gang boss? And then obviously, if that falls, you have Imp King Reform to worry about.
I'm not sure if you noticed, but there was also actually a revive as well onto a Sharon Saber. So there's actually been 2 shuffled to the bottom of the deck. So that's something that's pretty interesting and a little play on the back end. But that being said, though, Jumping Lion was able to keep actually keep all of these imps alive. So she's powered up that Imp Gang boss to be a true Imp Gang boss at 7-9, and some real big damage coming right on down onto Miss Golden Duck here. Down
has
to 9
to just
HP.
hope here. Sunken Saber, this has to hit Hydrolodon, I think. Or the Mountain Bear. It hits King Crush. That's, in this case at least, perhaps one of the worst options. You still get to clear the Imp Gang boss, which is not the worst, but you know how dangerous it is to leave this whiteboard events here, and that's exactly why. Now, you have so many choices here, right? You could trade off 2 imps and get the Imp King Reform infused right now, which it looks like that's what we're going for here. Not so much of a need to draw cards when you can just go for the win right away. The infused Imp King Reform going to make sure that your board's full regardless and provide that very substantial buff to damage. With so little health available from his Golden Duck, there is no need to go deeper in the deck for Jumpy Lion. Just going to get the well-played emote, and the Hunter deck overrun here, trying to set up a combo that's a little too intricate for a little too uncertain a payoff.
Yeah, unfortunately, you can see what Miss Golden Duck was trying to do there, but just didn't actually eventuate into what the game plan was for her. That being said, though, on the flip side, of course, Jumping Lion quite happy to walk away with the win in this particular match, and of course be now match point from qualification, whereas Miss Golden Duck now is fighting for her life and to remain into this qualifying round. So things definitely beginning to heat up here for all the players. Of course, they want to just walk away with the fact it's $25 on the line, not just the qualification. And of course, being able to qualify will grant you an opportunity to win at $2,000 if you manage to fight your way through, of course, the gauntlet of players waiting to obviously engage you in competition. Now we are moving into what's going to be. It's going to be the Hunter again for Ms. Golden Duck, jumping straight back into the action. And of course, now it is going to be, I believe, the Rogue here now left for Jumping Lion. It looks like a priest. It's not a priest. It's a rogue.
You paused for a second, Mendrix. I was ready to flip over the days since last disguise incident. Good catch. Jumping Lion's priest.
How many of those have we got now at the moment in time? How many days?
Oh, it's happened like 5-6 times. It's really, that's not even kidding. The number of times the production have been rused or the admin team, like this guy's getting everybody. I'd hate to run into this on the ladder.
I can just imagine the production that's like, oh, they're using the wrong one here. Okay, we need to...
It happens so often. We have no faith in the player's ability to play the deck actually registered. We're so used to people just register. It's like, hey, you didn't sign up with a warrior deck. You can't do that. And it's like, no, this is my rogue. I'm so sorry.
Yes, of course, yeah. That's definitely on us. That's definitely on us.
Bring this in though, Mendrix. This is potentially the final game of our entire qualifiers. So
it is,
I just want to make sure that we're on top of this from the start. Jumpy Lion, okay, it looks good, right? Double Sinstone Graveyard in hand. That's all the ammunition you want to control the board and the game eventually as well. You're up against the Hunter and the Mage. These are slower decks. You should theoretically have all the time in the world to execute your combo. But Jumpy Lion, right? You have to imagine there's some sort of psychological factor. You have already lost twice with this deck today. You just got a win, but that was with the Warlock deck. So now, unfortunately, you're back on this Rogue that's been kind of a sticking point for you, and this is the match that you need to win to qualify. It's about as bad as a situation can be when you're on, qualification point.
And what's really interesting there as well, lets the Peasant stay there. I don't think there was actually any... Could have used that Tooth of Netherian there, right? This is the thing that's a bit interesting. Had the opportunity to do it, lets Ms. Golden Duck actually draw into the extra cards here.
You have to consider as soon as you fire that off, it breaks the disguise. So you're counting how many cards you've drawn, and thus what the eventual cost of any nulls you find will be. And it's especially hard when you don't have the nulls in hand. Because obviously you might top deck one next turn, and you really like it to cost, 1, 2, not 3 or 4. But, maybe you don't draw it at all, and you've let your opponent get an extra card and an extra couple of points of damage on you, start their snowball rolling, all because you greeted it a little too hard trying to get the null discount. And look, almost always we see it discounted to 2, sometimes to 1. So I feel like it's pretty consistent for this deck, but that was definitely a testing situation, and Jumpy Lion just had to think for a moment, do I autopilot this the way I always do, or is this the side case where it is worth breaking Disguise early just to disrupt the Peasant? I think if we were against something like a Token Druid deck, you might have seen that fired off, but especially because Tooth and Nefarian, you would really rather get the honorable kill on it. Chose to hold on to things, and now we've broken Disguise. Shroud of Concealment is available, so that will help us find even more gas, but I think this might be a good chance to drop the first Sinstone Graveyard. It's a little bit unfortunate there's no coin or anything to get a discount. Okay, runs out the Tooth of Nefarian, not the Serrated Bone Spike here. So goes for the card discovery to reload the hand and keep the spell count high, rather than the discount to try and make this turn bigger. We'll see whether or not that means that we're going to play the location out, but not deploy a Ghost immediately. But with 2 Sinstones in hand and Shroud of Concealment to find the nulls or find Edwin, I feel like you can afford to make a sort of moderate-sized minion here.
Yeah, we can see the Jumping Lion now has actually dropped down that Sinstone Graveyard as well, so looking to see if she does pull the trigger and summons it. But she does hold the Ghost, wants to keep that there, is just going to have it in play. I guess, it is 2 mana that you can spend on other cards in the future, so perhaps wants a bigger Ghost, isn't feeling too threatened at the moment by Miss Golden Duck. Miss Golden Duck, of course, just goes to face, with that Harpoon gun in tow, also decides to grab that Water Scribe as well, so you can see Miss Golden Duck has got a lot of ammo, a lot of HP. Things definitely going the way of Miss Golden Duck at the moment. But of course, Miracle Road is called a Miracle Road for a reason. and perhaps Jumping Lion, she'll have the ability to pull off a miracle.
This could be a very, very big turn here. Shroud of Concealment isn't always what you start with, but having the on the actual turn you're comboing, but with Sinstone Graveyard already in play and these nulls discounted to 0, and even hits the second null off it, so fully gets paid for that decision. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like you have the chance to get the sort of... oh, actually, sorry. Serrated Bone Spike doesn't require the honorable kill. That was the... I forgot that part. So, yeah, no, everything lining up here really well for Jumpy Lion. Could even potentially decide to just go null, into Bone Spike, into discounted second Sinstone Graveyard, into 2 very large ghosts, and that would fully explain the decision to hold it from the last turn. Not because a 2/2 ghost isn't good enough, but because of the cooldown on the location. It's much better if you have both graveyards to wait and use them both in the same turn. Literal double value there, and what a way to open a game that could easily be your ticket into the champion stage of the Hearthstone Open.
And we're talking about a miracle coming through, and this is exactly what we expect from Miracle Rogues here. Big 5/5s, or 2 5/5s on board there. Of course, also has that wide paw nose as well. So definitely looking really good here for Jumping Lion now. Turn the corner and ready to put that damage right back into Miss Golden Duck's face. Of course, does not want to actually take this, sitting down. Will actually use that Tavish as well. Gets the improved freezing trap, the improved emergency maneuvers. Looks like it is going to actually be... I'm checking to see what the actual choice at the back of that is, but has options again. It was freezing trap on that side there, and explosive trap. Okay, so
I mean, these are the options you take in this situation, but unfortunately, Jumpy Lion deliberately seems to have played around this. All the minions on board are too big for even the improved explosive trap to work, and by returning that null to hand, I think it's just going to... Okay, no, wow, it resets the full cost. Okay, big. I had not figured on that, but... You're still taking so much damage here, and unfortunately, because you spent that coin, I was a little bit surprised that the decision was made to coin out Tavish, right? You coined up from 5 to 6. You had a 5-cost play in Pet Collector, and, yeah, it doesn't feel especially great because the Sharo Saber that you pull out, it's not big enough to kill a minion, but you have Devouring Swarm in hand, so you could definitely have at least killed a null, and then you could coin out Mountain Bear, the Wall of Taunts, or Hydrolodon, right? Much more impactful cards, seemingly, than this Tavish, and maybe you were hoping for a different set of secrets, but with the way things have worked out, even with the 5 armor that hero gives you, I don't imagine you've got the mana spare to use the hero power in the near future. It just looks rough from this Golden Duck now.
Yeah, it is definitely a rough situation. Of course, that Hydrolon would get the best value if it is actually able to attack the ghosts. I feel Jumping Lion probably would have actually held the Hydrolon, or Jumping Lion would have actually held the ghosts in play to stop the Hydrolon from getting extra heads, and actually make sure that we clear out the big boy first, and then make that move afterwards on the heads that were available. As you can see, Miss Golden Duck now, she's just holding the line down to 18 HP. Of course, we'll get that shuffled away. Jumping Lion still has some big ghosts on board here, but the board is being cleared away by these spells in tow as well, and the fact that you're going to be able to actually get these attacks off. Big clears of getting rid of those ghosts, but a lot of, I guess you could say, a lot of resources was dedicated to just staying alive at this point for Miss Golden Duck.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised about the decision to play out the Vicious Slither Spear there. I'm not sure if Ms. Golden Duck expected the trigger for the Slither Spear to boost its attack before it hit the ghost from the spell effect. It's not a big deal. They both go back to hand, but I think you could have ended that turn with Slither Spear in play. These are very small margins right now. And look, that was a great clear. It was impressive stuff. And next turn, you are going to have that 7 mana. So presumably, you have another clear coming up. But what you have to be worried about always with this road deck is the stealth. And moreover, the weapons. You do thankfully have some pretty strong taunts. Probably as strong taunts as any deck in, the vicinity of the meta has right now. But I'm still afraid it might not be enough for Ms. Golden Duck. We're going to have to see. Very big turn here. Opens with Maestra, so not gunning for Edwin just yet. This looks like it's going to just be 2 5/5 stealth ghosts holding both Edwin and Necrolodraka. So Jumpy Lion not rushing at all with 2 Sinstones in play, decides that's enough in terms of committing all my win conditions at once. Let's say you answer this board, and then I'll decide whether I want to go for something. I thought we might get a stealthy Edwin, but this is a perfectly fine board as well.
Well, we can see now the choice is for Miss Golden Duck to see what she decides to do. Hydrolon is the option available. And again, a nice big board for Jumping Lion, nice and wide. Well, not that wide, but is definitely looking pretty mid-range at this moment in time in terms of what's been built up. And like you said, that Edwin is still going to be available for Jumping Lion. Or
it has to be Mountain Bear, pretty much. Right? You're on 13 life. Your opponent has 10 power stealth. You're very confident, most likely, that they can kill you out of hand. So you basically, I can't see a scenario where you don't just sort of put down Mountain Bear and pray. You could Pet Collector actually, and you can Pet Collector out the Sunken Saber, but that, like, the best thing that gets you is a Mountain Bear. Goes for Hydrolodon after all, which is interesting. I mean, you get the guarantee. I guess it's sort of like conservative in some ways, because you clear the things that you're able to clear. You guard against your opponent having some sort of way to remove all your taunts from play quickly and then bash through. But with so much damage represented by these stealth ghosts alone, it's so difficult to survive in this situation. And I can't imagine that Jumpy Lion misses lethal here one way or the other.
Yeah, I don't think Jumping Lion will do it. It's still summing up. It's still playing a number of things here beforehand. Okay, let's just see this, because this is just summing up. I think just
swag
playing
mode, I guess.
Yeah,
this is still got all
playing
these.
with her food at this moment in
Jump time, exactly right. Could have just gone ghost, wicked stab to the face, but wanted to show just how dead Ms. Golden Duck was. Yeah, I'll even shadow step my Edwin. Anyway, 4-3 dagger to the face is gonna secure it. So Jumpy Lion makes it through as our final qualifier. Very apologies to Ms. Golden Duck there. At least you get to go out with a bunch of Hydrolon heads on the board. It looks majestic, but the Precon Beast Hunter put up more of a fight than I expected. Not quite enough of a fight in the end to secure qualification, Mendrix.
Yeah, a little bit of swag points, I guess you could say, they're coming across from Miss Golden Duck in terms of how that was ending out in the end there. But congratulations, of course, to Jumpy Lion for qualifying. Very well done to her in that scenario there. And apart from that, Bart, that's it for the rest of the day. There, we've got our qualifications. Of course, it's going to be Jumping Lion. She's going to have the not the $50, the $25. Whereas Remedy, she's walking away with the 50, and of course that first seeding. But opportunities still abound to walk away with a little bit of extra. What's your feeling with all of this?
I feel very happy to see the players who make it through. Obviously, your heart breaks for everyone who entered and missed out, especially the people who missed out by just a slot. Obviously, there's been quite a few third places over all of these qualifiers, and those players, I just have to say, come back next open, right? Like, the chances spring eternal, but we have this great mix of returning names who we recognize from last year and who will do very well. Jumpy Lion among them. And we also have, a swath of new players. We have a mix of players with seemingly very committed lineups that are full of their own unique tech, and players who have been in multiple qualifiers and showed up with different decks each time. So I have a feeling that we're going to get a real firecracker of a final series when it comes time for top 16. And, I'm a bit selfish, Mendrix. That's what I'm here for. The players, they've got their own goals. I just want to see some good Hearthstone.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very keen to see what the results is. The cream de la crop, I guess you could say, coming up for us in the coming weeks. And of course, I just want to close the day out by saying a huge congratulations to all of our players who have qualified. A huge thanks to everyone who's competed and was involved with our qualifying rounds. And of course, we need to thank Blizzard, Maccas, and Mate and Internet Mobile for helping us put everything on. We'll be back on September 10th and 11th to conclude our top 16 and top 8 finals. So until then, stay safe and have a good one.